Hello and welcome everybody to this Friday's VCHealth. This is the second workshop of a 12-part series new here in 2021, focused on mental health and entrepreneurship and all the different subtopics that go along with that. Today, as you might remember from January, we have our two speakers, Bruce Trimble, who's the Director of Business Development at the BridgeWay, as well as Ken Clark, who's the CEO and founder at Chenal Family Therapy. They are our two presenting sponsors, obviously the BridgeWay and Chenal Family Therapy. Thank you both so much for supporting this program, and also our corporate sponsors, Frost Accounting Firm, Wright Lindsay Jennings, the Little Rock Regional Chamber, and Simmons Bank. We do have some upcoming programs that I want to make sure everyone's aware of. The Venture Center puts on a number of programs throughout the year. A lunch and learn that's coming up on March 5th at noon is going to focus on fintech meeting college savings with a company called Suchi. And so this is a fintech company that's conquering not necessarily student loans, but college savings with the 529 plan. So you'll learn more about that company and what they're doing in that regard. Also a VC workshop on March 12th at noon, 2020 tax prep toolkit. Say that 3 times fast. Very interesting workshop with Frost Accounting Firm. They're going to come in and talk about some of the CARES Act legislation that's recently passed and what effect it may have on your taxes this year, and answer any questions you may have. Again, that's March 12th at noon. Also, we have a VC fireside chat. That is March 17th at noon. I was thinking it's not necessarily a fireside chat. It's kind of false advertising. It's at noon and there is no fire. So we're going to be presenting George Macris, who's the Simmons Bank CEO. So Wayne Miller, our executive director, will sit down with George Macris and they'll have a conversation about how George has navigated his way through all these leadership roles in his lifetime. So encourage everyone to check out those programs and a number of other ones that are in the works. You can find those on our website, our newsletter, Facebook, any of the social media platforms. And before we jump into today's discussion, we learned a lot from the first session that we did in January. And as these programs take place on the final Friday of every month. And so one thing we wanted to mention is we know there is a stigma still around this topic when it comes to mental health. And so we want to make sure that we are taking an effort to make sure everyone feels comfortable to either speak up, speak freely, ask questions. So we've done the following things. I just wanted to reiterate these points so everybody that's on the attendee side knows that this is what's happening. You might notice that we've switched to the webinar format. That way, you can't necessarily scroll through and see everyone's face who's in attendance. So we want to make sure this is in webinar format, and you'll notice it is recording, but that is only internal and for those who registered. We are not broadcasting this on Facebook Live. We want to make sure that those that register are the ones that see this content and feel comfortable with this information. You'll notice that the question option, if you have a question, you can use the chat feature. And I just wanted to make sure everybody is aware. I know a lot of folks are comfortable with meetings, but maybe not webinars. If you have a chat or a question, use the chat feature and you can send your question to panelists, which would only go to the panelists, myself, Bruce, Ken, and Mimi, or panelists and attendees. So just wanted to let you know that you can send your question directly to the panelists and not share it with everybody in attendance. That's an option. And then let's make sure I've gone over everything. We're going to save questions for the end. So we're going to only record the presentation portion, and then I'm going to stop recording and open it up for questions at the end. So save your questions until then, and I'll end the recording, and that way, that's an option as well. And of course, our speakers will not mention your name when they address your question. So just wanted to reiterate that for everybody to know that you can ask questions here and we'll do so accordingly. Okay, I want to go ahead and turn it over to Bruce and Ken for today's workshop.
Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen. And well, good afternoon. It's encouraging to see so many people interested in mental health. When we last met, I shared some facts about America's mental health, and COVID-19 only compounded those issues. According to a 2020 survey conducted by Universal Health Services, the parent company of the BridgeWay, 62% of American adults reported increased stress, anxiety, and/or depression. According to the American Psychological Association, 2/3 of employees report that mental health has undercut their job performance during the pandemic, and 40% of employees are burning out. They may be working amid economic uncertainty with few social outlets and possibly juggling childcare, disturbing any work-life balance. Meanwhile, working from home can make it difficult for supervisors to detect emerging mental health issues. But there's good news. In January of this year, the American Psychological Association reported that employers are talking about employee mental health more than ever before. Even pre-pandemic, employers were already learning to be more proactive in identifying symptoms of depression, anxiety, and other disorders. From my perspective, that is what we've experienced at the BridgeWay too. As employers and coworkers, here are 7 red flags to consider. Changes in work habits, changes in physical appearance, changes in demeanor. Dramatic changes in personality or conduct can indicate mental health struggles. Increased absenteeism or tardiness, outbursts and mood swings, or seeming withdrawn or avoiding interaction. You should know too that serious mental illnesses such as schizophrenia or bipolar disorder rarely appear out of the blue. Most often, family, friends, teachers, or individuals themselves begin to recognize small changes or a feeling that something is not quite right about their thinking, feelings, or behavior before an illness appears in its full-blown form. Also, 50% of mental illnesses begin by age 14 and 3/4 begin by age 24. Learning about developing symptoms or early warning signs and taking action can help. So I applaud your interest in this topic. If you encounter an employee with a performance issue, here are some steps you can take. Approach your concern as a workplace performance issue. Raise the possibility of providing accommodations if needed. Provide access to an EAP and assure the employee that EAP meetings are confidential. If you don't have an EAP, with the employee's consent, you may call the BridgeWay or another mental health provider, and we will assess your employee. Assessments are free and confidential. Set a time to meet again to review the employee's performance, and be sure to document meetings fully. There are some steps not to take when discussing these issues with employees. Don't offer a pep talk or be accusatory. Don't say I've been there unless you have been there. You may not understand or relate to a mental illness, but that shouldn't stop you from offering help. Don't try to give a name to the issue. Even if you suspect a particular illness, focus on how the employee's behavior is concerning you and how you want to help them improve. If you learn that a specific illness is causing the action, don't ask what caused the condition. Again, focus on solutions. Your employee may not know or may refuse to acknowledge that they have a mental health problem. In that case, there may be little you can do to help them. At that point, focusing on work performance only is the best approach. Finally, I would suggest taking an empathetic approach. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. I've read that empathy cannot be taught, but it can be inspired. And with that in mind, please take a look at this.
Bruce, I feel your pain. How's that for an empathy moment?
I do appreciate that, and I'm not sure why this is not playing, but I think it's a good time for me to hand it off to my good friend and colleague, Ken Clark.
Hey, everybody. Well, if you get it up and running, let me know, and we can pause and divert. Hey, everybody. I'm Ken Clark. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as the founder of Chenal Family Therapy. We are a 20 location and rapidly growing mental health behavioral outpatient system in Arkansas and now in Dallas, Texas as well. We are big believers in our company that we have to do what we call live what we sell. Ironically, there's a lot of workplaces in all fields, but as well in my unique field, that though they claim to be about employee wellness and doing the right thing by their folks, are ironically either unaware or maybe even toxic places to be. So I want to give you a couple concepts and a couple tips and tools today as far as upping the mental health game in the workplace with your team. One, I want to point out what we all seem to be knowing and embracing now, which is culture is a big driver of outcomes in companies, right? So culture, what it feels like to be part of a company, affects productivity and it affects innovation and it affects people, doing their job when nobody's looking versus finding a way to decompress when nobody's looking. So culture is super important. Well, culture is just the sum total, probably of the mental health of a population of any one company, right? So culture is made up of individuals who together are either collectively healthy or unhealthy or moving one direction or another. So if you want a better culture, you want a better bottom line, you want better retention, you want to be an altruistic boss, founder, leader who creates a better place for people to be, then we need to focus on the symbiosis, the relationship between the individual and how it feels to be them and culture. And how it feels to be them is not just about the paycheck, right? We get lured into this belief that if we pay well, if we have good benefits, that is enough. And just like every other aspect of life, individuals are called that for a reason. They're uniquely individual. They need and want different things from the job. And a company that really wants to care for its culture by caring for the individual needs to learn to examine and engage with individual needs and recognize and prioritize that. This is a super important related piece that I want to throw in there, and then we'll get into tips. In addition to that culture and individual symbiosis, we need to realize that people spend half their waking hours at a job, right? That even when they're not at the job, that they are spending hour after hour probably at home, either doing that job when they shouldn't because they're a high performer or because they've been asked, or they're worrying about the job, or they're thinking about work tomorrow or the big project or if layoffs are going to happen. So the reality is, despite what we've been told over and over and over and over again in corporate America, that work is not personal, I would argue that there's maybe nothing more personal than work. I spend 4 to 5 times at work every day what I do with my wife and my kids who I would jump into traffic for, right? Like the vast majority of my education, my livelihood, my identity, my sense of pride in self or my sense of failure, they're all related to this job. And this notion that that is not personal is one of the greatest disservices we can do to ourselves and our teams. So we put those two together, right? That individual and culture are this symbiotic loop. They feed off each other. And when they're going well, we spin out profits and productivity and health and we win awards. And when we're not, we break down. And at ground zero of that is the recognition that there is maybe nothing more personal in people's lives than what they show up and do at your company for a paycheck. It is a absolute ground zero for who they see in the mirror. So to that end, I want to throw a couple of thoughts at you, a couple of tools, and give you some things that you can try. Number one, we need to realize that from a mental health point of view, probably above all else in the workplace, fear is one of the great drivers of unproductive company behavior. And the absence of fear is one of the great drivers of creativity and innovation and taking chances and all that kind of stuff. That our brain is wired, and probably there's a neuro person here listening somewhere, a neuropsychologist that will be able to explain it better. But the back part of our brain, right, the amygdala, the part of us that is the reptilian brain that controls fight, flight, or freeze, it doesn't run at the same time that the front part of our brain that creates and writes poetry and dreams and falls in love runs. You only get to run one or the other, right? And so when we're afraid, we're done being creative. When we're jumping out of the way of a car, we're done writing poetry, right? And so above all else, you need to recognize how fear plays out in the workplace. There's an amazing book one of my mentors, Barry Goldberg, gave to me a few years back. It's called Building an Everyone Culture. Or it's called An Everyone Culture, and the subtitle is Building a Deliberately Developmental Organization. A couple of Harvard researchers, and what they came up with was that roughly 30 to 40% of all work behavior is actually CYA behavior, people covering their butts so they're not seen poorly, so they're not the low contributor in the food chain. All, like, an immense amount of what we do at work is driven by the fear of how we'll be perceived. Will we be fired? Will we not get the promotion? So when we talk about mental health, if we don't talk about removing fear from the workplace, we're not getting it. That individuals that live in fear have to manage fear, create fear in one another. That is a workplace that's going to drive mental health situations deeper and deeper into the hole, right? So that's one of my big questions for you today. One of my big admonitions is, what are you doing to destroy fear in your workplace, with your employees, within yourself, right? It's scary to be a founder. There's a lot of times where I curl up on the floor and grab my binky and suck my thumb because it's just too much and I'm so afraid, right? It's part of the gig. So there's three things that we think you can focus on as far as the job at work and the things that both you get to do and that you empower other people to do. And I'm going to call those job design, job match, and job engagement, right? That we see a lot of cognitive dissonance. We see a lot of breakdown when people don't know what they're doing, when they're put into a job that doesn't match what they're gifted at, and when there's not feedback loops to help us understand, are they doing well or are they doing poorly? That part of mitigating that fear is making sure that when I hire somebody to do something, they know what it is that they're actually doing and they know what's expected of them and what those measurements are. That's job design, right? Because if they don't, they get in and they don't know what's going on and what words we're using, and they thought they were doing this, but now everybody's talking about this, and that's going to generate fear. That's going to generate the fake it till we make it mindset. All these things that lead to kind of tipping points within the individual stress of a person, which then of course feeds into the culture. Likewise, once people are actually in jobs, right? These aren't fire and forget type roles. That one of the best things companies can do is in the first 6 to 12 months, have a lot of meetings with the people they hired and saying, okay, now that you're in this job, how does it feel? Now that you're in this job, what's different than what I explained to you? Now that you're in this job, what do you realize about yourself? You thought that would be an amazing promotion. Now that you're in the middle of it, not all it's cracked up to be. So regular discussions about job match and helping people and making it safe for people to say, well, I thought I wanted to be the senior person on this team, but now that I am, I don't really like it. And unless we make it safe to say that and safe to change our minds, then we live in fear. People fake it till we make it. And a lot of times they don't make it. They break, right? They break down. And that leads into what is our ongoing job engagement measures, right? Which is a little different than employee satisfaction. Employee satisfaction surveys usually lead to a shrug. Yeah, sure, it's a good enough job. Yeah, whatever. Right. What we're really looking for is ways to measure. Do people show up every day and feel like they have a purpose and they're living out their calling and their skills and their gifts are used at the highest levels possible? If they do, their mental health is going to go through the roof, right? If they don't, it's going to plummet. They're going to start to feel imposter syndrome. They're going to start to break down, second guess. It's going to overflow to the home. They're going to go home. They're going to have one too many bourbons because of all the stress, right? So companies that care about mental health put a lot of deliberate thought into job design, job match conversations, and job engagement type surveys or measures on an ongoing basis. So for you as a leader, you as an employee, there's 3 or 4 things that I would recommend that you can take today and put in place, both to kind of help those things, but help the overall mental health. Number one is leaders, by definition, right? The word means that you go first, right? If you're a leader, you're at the front of the line. That means that you're the first one to try the punch. You're the first one to jump off the cliff. You're the first one. You're the guinea pig. That's what leader is, right? And so if we are not leading with our own mental health as a priority, if we're not taking care of self, if we're not proactively, instead of only reactively when things get bad, but proactively working out our mental health and becoming healthier, then why would we ever expect our employees to do so? Until we make it safe by example that it's okay to struggle, it's okay to wrestle, it's okay to ask for help. Why would anybody else think that it is? And at ground zero of that, and it's an old topic within business circles, but a great place to start is just the old emotional intelligence type testing, right? Like go out and go online, figure out where you're emotionally intelligent, where you struggle, what your blind spots are. We all tend to be empathetic with at least one or two emotions, right? Even the person who only is angry or apathetic, they're empathetic with those emotions. When they meet somebody else angry or empathetic, they know how to do that. Emotional intelligence is really about deepening our vocabulary, learning that there's like 50 different kinds of angry and 50 different kinds of bored, and learning the nuances, the different colors in the crayon box. So that's number one, is you need to prioritize emotional intelligence as a conversation with yourself within your household, so that it becomes a very natural thing to prioritize in the workplace. Number two, there's a lot of great tools out there on job match, job design, things that are even more in depth than Myers-Briggs and these other things. I'm a big fan of predictive index. Fair warning here, we're a certified consultant in it. We'd love to help you with that if you ever need it. But figuring out how to make sure that we get the right people in the right jobs and then measure how that goes after that, that's absolutely crucial. So if you've never done that, if you're just hiring or scaling haphazardly, or you've never looked at yourself in the job you're in, that's a worthwhile exercise to make sure that we match. The more that we don't have what we call congruence, right? Overlapping circles, the more that we're going to have cognitive dissonance and be unhappy with what we're doing. Last but not least, I'm a huge fan of this. I'm happy to talk to you about doing workshops. We do a thing called gratitude campaigns with a lot of companies. And what we know is that gratitude operates like the opposite, the antithesis, the antidote of fear. It's very hard to calculate gratitude in the front part of the brain and be afraid at the same time. For me, as an owner of a scaling company who feels all kinds of anxiety, one of my go-tos, and I've got stacks of them everywhere. They're spilled on my floor right now. I've got thank you notes just sitting around. I just start writing thank you notes when my anxiety kicks in, when my worry, when my self-doubt, when my imposter syndrome kicks in. You know what it does? It's like pulling the lawnmower cord on the front part of the brain. It fires up that prefrontal cortex, because we need to analyze our life and calculate, well, here's how things should have been, but here's how they were instead. And I'm thankful for that. And then when we write it and we see it and we send it and somebody says, thank you for saying thank you, that all knocks that fear offline. Gratitude campaigns in your own life, within your company, are one of the most important things you can do. There was a Harvard and Wharton combined study on the value of gratitude in the workplace. And they found that workplaces that had regular expressions of gratitude, employee productivity was higher by nearly 50%. Employee absenteeism dropped, workplace injury, retention went through the roof. That gratitude campaigns are one of the single best things you can do. It's like walking every day, right? So it's the mental health equivalent of walking every day. That when we express gratitude within the workplace and create that symbiotic environment, everybody's mental health gets better. So think about doing that. If you need help, you need ideas, reach out to me or reach out to the Venture Center and they can connect you with me. So there's some tools. We'll stop there and open it up to questions and discussion from there, but I hope that is helpful. Bruce, did you get your show to work?
No, I sent it to Ashley and Mimi. Maybe they can.
You could just act it out for us.
Yeah, there were a lot of players in that video. I don't have that bandwidth for acting.
Yeah. All right, so I'll turn it back over to Mimi and Ashley to facilitate questions. As always, thanks for having me. It's an honor to talk about this. Again, don't forget, half of our waking hours as humans are in the workplace. Mental health, it's ground zero, is in our workplace identities.
Thank you both. That was fantastic information. Bruce, I've got your email, but I'm not able to play the video. So I'm actually going to stop recording.
All right.